So I share this short poem from Hafiz, At This Party. I don't want to be the only one here telling all the secrets, filling up all the bowls at this party, taking all the laughs. I would like you to start putting things on the table that can also feed the soul, the way I do. That way we can invite a hell of a lot more friends. It's the way he wrote it. End of reading. So when I think of the word invitation, the first thought that pops into my head revolves around being invited to or not being invited to someone's party, right? You know, when we have our children have birthday parties, or when we've had birthday parties when we were young. You know, we can only invite so many people, or else it becomes like one of those, Project X movies where, it becomes a wild frat party or something. And, of course, it's always an alien. Nobody saw Project X, huh? Okay, so... Of course, it's always an alienating feeling when we are not invited to something, even if it's something that we didn't want to go to in the first place. It's just like, why didn't they invite me? And that should sensitize us to not wanting others to feel alienated. As Hafiz said, as I found out, we could invite a hell of a lot more friends. And I think we always find that out. We can always do more than we really believe we are capable of. But it is important to know that we as adults should consciously think about who and what we invite into our lives. So I know this is going to sound strange, but I always remember stories when I would watch like vampire movies or read books about vampires. There was an ongoing motif that one must first invite a vampire into their house before the vampire could come in. And once in, they can come and go as will. And we see this in the classic Bram Stoker's Dracula and the more current, somewhat current, movie television shows, The Lost Boys or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And the new vampire series, True Blood, actually, there is a concept that you can actually disinvite a vampire from your home. So I want you to think about that in your relationships with people. And I think it is interesting, especially also in comparing that to the Jewish and Christian scriptures as well. In each of the scriptures, there is a story of God inviting the Jewish people into covenant, or people inviting Jesus into their homes and their communities. And when we tend to look beyond this world, whether it be vampires or God, to explain why there is suffering or why even there is such beauty around us, even when we are intentional in exploring this mystical strain of thought within, it is always centered in invitation. I'm not really sure what the vampire thing has to do with all of this, to be honest with you, other than that it rose up within me as I was starting to think about my sermon today. And I try to pay attention to what rises up within me, and I encourage you all to do that as well, to pay attention to what is happening in our minds and in our lives. Now, vampires were not as popular when I was young, so I thought about this. Why vampires, right? But they were not as popular when I was young. I guess that sort of thing goes in cycles. Now we have Twilight and True Blood and all these other shows about them. But I remember when I was teaching youth religious education, so I asked the youth why there is such a fascination with vampires. And their answer was very easy, and it was so logical. It's about eternal life, right? That if they were vampires, they would be powerful, and clearly they didn't feel powerful in their lives. And they could have eternity then to figure things out in their life. So to me, That was a call to make our youth feel empowered just as adults are empowered in our religion. And it is something that is an important part of our youth religious education program. And it was something this congregation was very intentional about when they said you can be a member at the age of 16. They wanted to empower youth so they would feel empowered, so they would have power. Not just feel empowered, but they would have power. I do not believe that we invite trouble into our lives. I think life is as a continuum across our life, and one in which we are always learning more and more about our experiences. We tend to put labels on things and place judgments on things, and sometimes we have to do that sometimes to protect ourselves and those we care about based on our life circumstances. But we should be moving along and exploring the continuum and finding what is right for us. I remember when I was a teenager, my best friend and I would often get into trouble, and his parents were certain that I was a bad influence on him. And my parents were just as certain that he was a bad influence on me. But in truth, we were both bad influences. We were just exploring our lives in the environment in which we lived. And we were trying to learn about ourselves and trying to grow. And sometimes we made mistakes, and sometimes we paid for those mistakes, and sometimes we didn't. But we should always learn from our mistakes, and we should always grow from that learning. We should constantly be expanding our experiences and deepening our relationships with everyone and with everything around us. Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his Divinity School address, said, and I quote, this is somewhat adapted, "The soul invites every human to expand to the full circle of the universe and will have no preferences but those of love. You shall own the world. You shall dare and live after the infinite law that is in you and in company with the infinite beauty which heaven and earth reflect to you in all the lovely forms. The divine bards are the friends of my virtue, of my intellect, of my strength. The time is coming when all humanity will see that the gift of God to the soul is not a vaunting, overpowering, excluding sanctity, but a sweet, natural goodness, a goodness like thine, like mine, and that so invites thine and mine to be and to grow." End quote. To be and to grow. There's so much more to know about ourselves and others. Yes, even ourselves. To explore why we are like we are, to explore why we think how we think, to explore why we do what we do, and really to explore what we want to do going forward. Why we became searchers and found a community that embraces that search, and committing ourselves to a pluralistic, multicultural vision of the world that requires us to learn about others so that we can find not only the wholeness within ourselves, but the wholeness with ourselves and others. I love the vision of an iceberg in how we view the world. Now, from most of what I could find, and at least on Google, and I admit this is a Google fact, okay? This is not an academic fact. This is where my source is, but it says that almost 90% of icebergs are underwater and not visible from the surface. And so I want you to take that now and think about yourself. What percentage of who you are and what you believe is visible even to yourself, let alone to others? So much is below the surface. And you see on top, we can see what food you eat, what music you listen to, what your language is, performing arts, literature. These are all the customs that people can outwardly see, what you wear. But below the surface, you'll see there are things like values, etiquette, learning styles, norms, concepts of fairness, body language. Some cultures, it's insulting to stare someone in the face when they're talking to you. In our culture, often, at least I'll say the white male patriarchy culture, it is almost expected to be staring at somebody if they are talking to you. So we need to learn from each other and not assume something about someone based on a body language. Etiquette, all these social constructs are affected, all of them are affected by where we lived, when we lived, and with whom we lived. One that came to stark awareness for me was when I was in seminary, was the concept of time. That's one of the ones that's very deep below here. I was raised and I was taught all the time, you should show up 20 minutes before your appointment, no matter what it is. Whatever that is, you should show up 20 minutes. Partially, you never know, maybe that came from having to, be in a lot of traffic in New York, and you always tended to be late, so you always tried to plan to be there early. But it was more of a mindset. It was a sign of respect to be there early. But one of my instructors in seminary was from a different culture, and in his culture, you waited until the last person showed up before you started, no matter how late they were. So even though I was there on time, I wanted to get started as soon as the class started, and the teacher did not feel that way. And so this caused a lot of friction between us, actually, and until we deepened our relationship, and we were able to explain our frustration to each other, and how we ended up breaching that gap in cultural differences was to create a covenant with each other. Covenants are how we agree to be with each other despite our differences. We as Unitarian Universalists are a covenanted people. Because of our pluralistic theology, because of our search for truth, we may have many different ideas of how it is to be in religious community together. It's not like there's a pope who says one thing. Ours, as I said earlier, we are a shared ministry. We all partake and lead in the ministries of this congregation. And we come from many different cultural and religious backgrounds. And due to that, we have to covenant with each other, with love as our foundation. And we invite each other into dialogue. We invite each other into deeper relationship. And that takes time and commitment to bring forth. And so I formally invite all of you to do that. We had the new member ceremony today, and in it, we covenanted with each other to be open to each other's uniqueness and their unique gifts and perspectives. And in order to do that, I invite you and every other new member, no matter how long you have been here, because we assume we know everybody who's been here for a long time, but I would tell you, I think that's probably not true. I invite you into deeper relationship with the congregation and with each other. So at this time in our congregation, in addition to our ongoing programs, we're starting 3 new programs to give you the opportunity to go deeper. This Thursday, we will be starting our year-long monthly Soul Matters Connection Circle to discuss this very topic of invitation. And you can determine whether you want to discuss the thing about the vampires or not. That's your choice. But John Dunchief and others will be leading this, and it'll be based on topics of the sermon that I have the previous Sunday to allow you to delve deeper into what that can mean for you. The following Monday, we will be starting our sacred text exploration. And then on Tuesday, October 13th, Adult RE in Green Sanctuary will be leading a 3-week class on the Pope's encyclical on the climate. There's much to learn and there is much to do. But first, we should again be reminded of Emerson's call to be and to grow. And so, I invite you to find some silence, some stillness, some space in your life to hear that invitation. The invitation that is calling to you and only to you. You know, in our meditation group on Tuesday nights, we sit for 20 minutes in silence. We do it usually twice in the hour. Although we stay focused on our breath, it is natural that during that time things that are within us raise up within us. And so I invite you to take time in your day, every day, to sit in silence, even if it's just for 1 minute. And go ask yourself in the deep well of your soul, what is calling you? Don't judge it, don't rationalize it, just listen for a moment. I encourage you, everyone, just this week, take some time to do some discernment and invite into your consciousness that still small voice within that is calling to you. Listen to it. I invite you to be true to yourself. For it is only in being true to yourself that you can be authentic and thereby be in authentic relationships. When we connect our inner values and desires with our action in the world, we find authenticity in our lives. And when we invite authenticity in one part of our life, it often translates into many aspects of our lives. Such authenticity leads to wholeness. So whatever it is that raises up in your soul, I invite you to explore it, whether it is a sorrow or a joy. I invite you to touch the center of your sorrow. For we each experience loss and sorrow in our lives. Let us not suppress it. Let us befriend it. Let us explore it. Let us go deep underwater and understand that sorrow, for it will always be a part of us, and we need to learn how to live with it. I invite you also to dare greatly to meet your heart's desire and find joy. For even with sorrow in life, we can find joy in every moment if we look for it. Whether it be in the laugh or even the cry of a child, the changing colors of the trees and the leaves, the conversation with an old or a new friend, or for me, even the New York Mets winning the National League Eastern Division yesterday. Take comfort in every joy, both large and small. And I invite you to stand in the center of the fire with me. This is an invitation to create a vibrant, welcoming, diverse community. It's an invitation as well to seek out injustice in the world. And it's easy to stick one's head in the sand and lose ourselves in TV and sports and fiction. And there is a time and place for everything in the world, including those. I mean, I'll be watching the Jets this afternoon. I recorded it on my DVR, and so I can skip time by skipping through the commercials. I can be very efficient with my time that way. It's all a rationalization, I understand, but I need that, and I live with that. But I invite you and myself as well every day to participate in the world and not just be a spectator. If we're going to grow as human beings, as a congregation, and as a society, we have to have our values lead the way. And it cannot just be for ourselves, it must be for others as well. You know, when I was out at the Fall Pride Festival this weekend with our LGBTQIA project, I was remembering a time when people, due to their sexual orientation, had to stay hidden and were oppressed and were suppressed. And I remember a time in my lifetime when people were left alone to die of AIDS. And although there is still more work to be done and attitudes to be changed to create true equality, we do now, at least we have marriage equality as the law in this land. And as well, we have drag shows down at LeClaire Park. And as well in our denomination, we have openly gay, lesbian, and transgender ministers in our denomination, things that were not possible years ago. And because it happened, because somewhere a long time ago, someone had a vision. Someone had a vision and asked, why not? And they asked, why not? And just like some today, I don't know, some today, where did I go with that one? And asked, why not? I have all these arrows here, and that's never good. The last minute editing can always be challenging. But I have to say also that just like some today are uncomfortable with the Black Lives Matter movement now, 40 years ago, people in even our denomination, I don't know about this congregation, I wasn't here, were just as uncomfortable with the emergence of the LGBTQIA movement. But strong leadership and a commitment to our values led us to where we are today. And so with that in mind, I tell you, I am proud to be working with members and newcomers from our Racial Justice Project. Along with others in the community, we are creating a mental health court here in Iowa as an alternative to prison. And when some people said it could not be done, we kept asking why not, and we kept at it. And now it actually seems like a real possibility. But we cannot rest. There is more to be done. And I invite you to do what needs to be done. Robert Kennedy said, there are those who look at things the way they are and ask why, and I dream of things that never were and ask why not. So I invite you to think about what are your dreams for yourself, for the congregation, for the world. And then I invite you to ask, why not? Why not become a member? Why not become more involved? Why not deepen our relationships? I invite you to create a clearing in your life to find out where your passion and a great need in the world or the congregation meets, and take yourself there. It matters what you do. May it be so.